Here are 4 questions that you can ask yourself to figure out if your poor performance is more physical or if it's more mental. Hey there, I'm Eli Straw, I'm a performance coach and the founder of SuccessStarterThen.com. The first question you want to ask yourself is, am I performing well in practice right now? If you're performing well in practice, this is normally a sign that your poor performance during games is going to be more mental. There isn't usually something that is changing between practices and games in terms of your physical skills. A lot of times what can happen is that when you get to games, maybe you feel a little bit more anxiety, maybe you feel a little bit more fear. Now, we want to be very careful here because it's not just about thinking you're doing well in practice. It's about, are you actually performing well in practice? It's one thing to feel like, you are performing great in practice when maybe the truth is you're not performing as well as you think you are in practice, and then it's showing during games. So one of the best things that you can do to really figure out, am I performing well in practice right now, to get a good idea of, is this disconnect that's causing you to underperform during games, is it more mental, is you want to break your game down. So what you can do first is you can look at the basic drills that you do during practice. Are you doing those drills well? If you are, then that's going to show you that the kind of the core fundamentals, the core fundamental skills that you have, they're in place and they are finely tuned. For example, when you're hitting off the tee as a baseball player, is your swing feeling good? Are you able to hit the ball back up to the middle of the cage? Or are you able to hit it to the opposite side of the cage or the opposite side of the field when you want to? Or are you kind of rolling over and hitting little ground balls off the tee every time you swing? If you're a basketball player, are your free throws, when you're shooting free throws and nobody's around, are you able to make those free throws consistently? If you're a tennis player, are your serves good when you're just doing serving drills on your own or with a coach? We want to get a clear idea of, are these core fundamentals of your sport, are they good and are they in place during practice? Because if those are not, this might actually be a sign that your poor performance is more physical because you don't really have those foundational skills finely tuned like you need to. Then you want to look at game-like situations in practice. As soon as the tempo is picked up and as soon as the speed is picked up in practice, are you still performing well or do you start to underperform? This can show maybe there is, some kind of rushing that's taking place, which may be more mental, or it might show that, your skills are good in very kind of comfortable and safe environments like hitting off the tee, for example, but as soon as the ball is coming at you with speed, you don't have very good timing. When you strip back your game like this and you look at it objectively, you get a very clear idea of what right now is holding me back, right? What's causing me to perform poorly during games? And if all of that is good and you're really performing great in practice, that's probably a sign that something mental is holding you back during games. There's a mental block. If you're performing badly in your drills or if you're performing badly during the, kind of the game-like situations during practice, this might be a sign that something fundamental in your sport or your skills might be off, but it also still might be a sign that there's something mental, which we're going to talk about here in a second. And the next question you want to ask yourself is, have there been any good performances recently? The reason that you want to ask yourself this question is because your skills are not going to come and go with you waking up one morning and, you playing one game and then waking up the next day and now all of a sudden your skills have gone out the window. Yeah, there might be days where you're performing better and days where you're not performing as great, and that's just the nature of sports. But one of the things you want to be careful of whenever you're thinking about what's causing my poor performance is you want to be careful that you don't try to overanalyze and fix things that don't need to be fixed. A great example of this is swinging sports, and 2 main ones are going to be golf and baseball. With baseball, I can speak on this personally because it's something that I had experience with when I played baseball. And that's, you have a couple good games and then all of a sudden you have a bad game. When you have that bad game, you start to overanalyze your swing and feel like you need to fix something and figure out, okay, why was I 0 for 4 today? What can I fix? What do I need to work on this week? And then all of a sudden when you're in training, at least this is what happened to me, I would start to overanalyze my swing and try to fix things. But a lot of times what would happen is I would start to dig myself deeper and deeper into a hole to where I couldn't get back to that really confident feel I had those games before. This is something I see a lot in golfers who start to fix or try to tweak their swing or their putting whenever they have one bad round or even one bad hole sometimes. So you want to ask yourself, have I been performing well recently? Because number one, This can be a sign that there is a, just kind of a fluke or an off day that you want to really just not worry too much about, move past, and, see, okay, if I start to perform badly day after day after day or game after game after game, maybe I'll raise alarm then, but not quite yet. Another reason you want to think, have I performed well recently, or have I had some good games recently, is because it might be a sign that there is something about this team that you just played, or something about the team or the teams that you played recently that causes you to have more of a mental block. A great example of this is if you play a team that everybody else says is really good, right? Maybe in the past you've played teams that they might even have been at the same talent level, but they didn't have that same kind of mystique about them of, oh, this is a really great team. But then all of a sudden you play this team that everybody says is really good, so you approach the game with a little bit more fear, or maybe a little bit more tension and anxiety. The next question you want to ask yourself is, what am I thinking about during games? This is going to start to help you get an idea of your mental state during games. At the core of many mental game challenges is going to be your thinking. Likewise, at the core of many great performances is going to be your thinking. There are certain types of thoughts that help you and certain types of thoughts that hold you back when you're performing. Now, a lot of times I know that, great performances can feel like they are done free of thought. And that is very likely the case, because that's what happens when you're performing in the flow. But we can't force the flow state. So what we can do instead is we can think, when you are playing a game, what kind of thoughts are you having? And are those thoughts more positive and productive, so they're helping you perform better, or are they hurting you and holding you back? When you start to really pay attention to the types of thoughts you're having, if you're having more negative thoughts, that's one of the first places that you want to look, and one of the first things you want to work on changing when you're trying to change performing poorly during games into performing better during games. Because the more you criticize yourself after mistakes, the more you question yourself when you're facing good opponents, the less confidence you're going to play with, the less focus you're going to play with, and the poorer your performances are going to be. So really pay attention right now to, what are you thinking about during games? And then the final question that you want to ask yourself is, what image do I hold of myself? This is a really interesting one, because it plays off more of a deeper sense that you have of yourself as a player. How do you see yourself as a player? What is your self-image? Do you see yourself as a practice player, or do you see yourself as a game time performer? If you see yourself as a practice player right now, then that might be the reason that you underperform during games. This identity as a practice player can lead to you playing with more tension, more anxiety, and more fear during games, especially if your games have not been very good recently. This is a cycle that I see a lot in athletes that I work with, where they experience a bad game, and then that bad game leads to them thinking that they're underperforming. And then that underperforming and thinking that they're underperforming leads to a negative self-image, which leads to more fear moving forward, because they don't want to perform badly moving forward. So you need to be very careful of what kind of image do you hold of yourself. Do you see yourself as a relaxed player, a focused player, a confident player? That might lead to better performances. Do you see yourself as a player who chokes under pressure? Do you see yourself just as an anxious player in general? The image you hold of yourself can be one of the main reasons why you are performing poorly right now as an athlete. The main reason that I wanted to go through these 4 questions is because I want you to make sure that you are looking in the right areas when it comes to, how can you change this? How can you perform better? Because I know that's the main thing that's on your mind when you're performing poorly. How can I turn this around? But you need to be careful. Don't try to overanalyze your mechanics if they're not the thing to blame, right? You don't want to be looking in the wrong direction, because that can cause more harm than good. You want to make sure that you are targeting what you need to target first. So the final thing I'll say on this is that probably 8 to 9 times out of 10, this is from my experience working with athletes, it's going to be something mental that's causing you to underperform during games. So that's going to be a great place for you to look. First, make sure that you are performing as focused as you can perform. Make sure you are performing as relaxed as you can perform. Make sure you are performing as confidently as you can perform. But if all those are in place and you're still underperforming, then it might be something physical. Likewise, if you do objectively examine your game and you see that in practice you're not performing that well physically, you don't feel like even in the simplest drills you're doing well physically, that also might be a sign that it's something physical. But you want to make sure that you don't jump off the deep end and start trying to fix things when things don't need to be fixed, because that can cause more harm than good. Now, speaking on making sure your whole mental game is in check, a big part of that is making sure you are approaching games with a great mindset. So what I've done right here is I've linked another video that goes into detail on mental preparation and specifically putting together a pregame routine for yourself as an athlete. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, please hit that like button and subscribe if you haven't already. I put out new videos each week on sports psychology and mental training.